But now let's have a look at a problem that could really be on our doorstep very, very quickly. And that is Japan. Japan's population is ageing rapidly. New figures released today show that 1 in 10 people now are over 80 years of age, and 29.1% of the 125 million population is aged 65 or older. Now, what does that do to their economy? They have very generous pension packages and things like that in Japan. The birth rate is dropping rapidly, as it is in the UK. So I thought it was a good time to have a look and see whether this is really the way the world is going, and what do we do about a lack of population? Is migration or immigration the only solution? Dr. Mansoor Sumro joins me now, who's Innovation and Enterprise Lead, Future of Work Research Centre at Teesside University's International Business School. Good evening to you, Doctor. It's very nice to see you.
Good evening, Petrie. Good to be here.
Now, when I read this story and looked at Japan's issues, and it is a major problem for Japan and surrounding countries, they don't quite know what to do next, do they? Because we've all got an ageing population thanks to better healthcare, better diets, although probably not in the UK, but better diets and you know, all of those safety measures that we've got at home, smoke alarms. We're all living a bit longer. So what are we going to do about it?
All right, fantastic. In Japan, the statistic that Petrie, you mentioned, that over 10% of population in Japan is over 80. Certainly it's alarming, and it is a demographic crisis. So as you mentioned, birth rate is low and life expectancy is high. At the Future of Work Research Center, what we look at is the economic perspective and what impact this has on companies and businesses. And what we see is that it brings us absolutely a labor shortage, shrinking workforce. Now, in Japan, the government has, over the last decade, has been promoting the reintegration of elderly citizens and stay-at-home mothers into the workforce, especially over the last decade. But it looks like that's not enough. Now, what does this translate in? I mean, when we look at the situation here in the UK, we have been talking about early retirement, aging population, labor shortages. Just like other countries, aging population certainly puts added pressure on healthcare and the social care systems. But what this does imply when we compare Japan, particularly, I mean, looking at the headlines of today, comparing it with the United Kingdom, a smaller workforce in the UK can pose serious long-term problems for the UK economy. It would cut the volume of goods and services the country is able to produce. It can choke off GDP growth, and also can likely result in sluggish real income improvements.
And it's also the case, isn't it? Just to put it in very simple terms, who's going to pay the welfare bill? If we don't have young people coming through, there's going to be none of those workers who are going to keep me in my huge state pension when I reach about 90, which I think it'll be up there by then because they're already increasing the age. But, you know, we need people to be working and earning to pay, and we need more of them if there's more of us.
That's right. Now, if we look at the similarities and differences between the situation that is in Japan and in the United Kingdom, so certainly we see similarities in terms of healthcare challenges and pension systems. So both the countries, when we look at them, they have a growing elderly population, not with the same magnitude, but certainly there is a problem on both sides. And both countries have acute pressure on healthcare systems. When we look at the pension systems, again, both in the UK and Japan, they have established pension systems which provide financial support to elderly citizens. But when we look at these systems, the economic well-being of retirees and the aging population, when we're talking about that as a long-standing issue, how does it translate in terms of pension systems? I think that's where we need to see. In contrast, when we look at the differences, Petrie, between Japan and the United Kingdom, birth rates in Japan, certainly there is exceptionally low, whereas in the UK, it's slightly higher birth rate, which helps offset some of the effects of population aging to a certain extent. But the second difference that we see between Japan and the United Kingdom is the immigration. So the UK has been historically more open to immigration, relatively comparing it with Japan. So which has contributed in positive way in addressing the labor shortages. Japan, on the other hand, has more restrictive immigration policies, which has limited its ability to address the labor shortages, which are caused by the aging workforce.
And Japan are saying that we don't want to go the immigration route. We want to encourage people to have children. But that is not working in Japan. It is not working. People are having smaller families because of economic pressures that are felt in Japan as much as they're felt in the UK. People in the UK are having smaller families. You know, long gone. When I was growing up in my village, I was one of 5 in my family, and there were 4 other families that had 5 children in a tiny village. It meant that we caused chaos, but it was, you know, they were big families then. You don't really see that much anymore.
Exactly. I mean, from economics perspective, we use a term called economic dependency ratio. It's a ratio which compares the number of non-working dependents, for example, children and elderly, to the working age population. And what we see is that it tends to rise in terms of aging societies, which in turn hinders economic growth and puts pressure on working age population, which then support the dependents.
So if Japan can't encourage larger families or even people to have 1 child or 2 children, then they are going to have to open their doors to immigration, presumably.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one solution that we've seen that other countries have followed. So that's one. But again, this is maybe not an easy answer to this, but what we're looking at is that we have to think from like the economic perspective, which is the long-term demand, innovation and productivity. How will the behavior of saving and investment change in the country? We also need to think from the intergenerational equity perspective, which is balancing the needs of different generations. So I think the problem is more complex. It goes beyond the economic impact that we're talking about, but it also puts immediate pressure on the companies and firms who are operating in the economy because they face workforce demographic issues with the aging population.